The observation deck exploded without warning. Celine Varick's instincts fired before her conscious mind could process the breach. The hull rupture tore through the starboard viewing platform where the Crythian cubs had gathered for their first glimpse of a pulsar's radiation dance. Metal screamed, atmosphere howled toward the void, and in that fraction of a second, Celine saw them 6 younglings frozen in terror, their chitinous bodies too small, too slow to reach safety. She didn't think. Humans rarely did when children were involved. Her boots mag-locked as she launched herself across the deck, arms spread wide like some ancient earth predator protecting its nest. The first cub, Tovik, the smallest one with crystalline eyes that had followed her everywhere during the journey, collided with her chest. She caught 2 more mid-leap, tucking them against her torso as the emergency bulkhead began its agonizing descent. Too slow. Always too slow on these Crythian vessels built for methodical precision rather than human paranoia. The shrapnel came next. Celine felt rather than saw the debris field jagged fragments of reinforced hull plating propelled by decompression like ancient shuriken. Her body made the calculation automatically. Turn her back, shield the cubs, accept the punishment. Pain was temporary. Dead children were forever. The first shard punched through her left shoulder blade. The second buried itself in her lower back. The third carved a burning line across her ribs. Celine's vision whitened, but her grip never loosened. She pulled the cubs closer, her body a fortress of fragile flesh against the metal storm, and activated her emergency beacon even as darkness crept into the edges of her consciousness. The bulkhead sealed, emergency protocols engaged. Atmosphere stabilized, and Celine Varick collapsed onto the deck with 6 terrified Crythian cubs huddled beneath her bleeding form. She woke to silence, not the silence of an empty room, but the suffocating quiet of absolute attention. Celine's neural implants fed her information before her eyes opened. Medical bay, stable condition. 47 hours unconscious. Significant tissue regeneration in progress. And 15 biosignatures in the room with her. Her eyes cracked open to a sight that would have sent most species scrambling for weapons. The Crythian High Council surrounded her medical pod in a perfect semicircle, each member standing motionless in that uniquely predatory way that had earned their species their reputation across 300 systems. They were apex hunters, evolutionary perfection honed across millennia. 7 feet of scaled muscle, razor-sharp claws, and mandibles that could shear through battle armor. They were watching her breathe. The human stirs. The largest one rumbled, his translator rendering the clicking language into something approximating standard. War Chief Kravath, if Celine's fuzzy memory served. This is unexpected. Our medical analysis suggested another 20 hours minimum. Celine tried to sit up. Her body informed her this was a terrible idea through 16 distinct channels of agony. She did it anyway, because lying down while surrounded by apex predators felt wrong on an instinctive level no amount of diplomatic training could override. The cubs, she croaked. Tovik and the others, alive. A smaller Crythian stepped forward, her scales bearing the iridescent pattern of the medical cast. Unharmed, thanks to your intervention. Though we struggle to comprehend the mechanism of your decision-making process. Celine blinked, confusion cutting through the pain medication. Mechanism? War Chief Kravath tilted his head in that bird-like way that always preceded important Crythian statements. You threw yourself into shrapnel. For cubs, not of your species. Not of your pack. Not even of your evolutionary line. He paused, mandibles clicking in what might have been confusion or awe. Our analysts have reviewed the security footage 732 times. We find no logical explanation. They're children, Celine said. As if that explained everything. To her, it did. The council exchanged glances, a ripple of movement that suggested entire conversations happening in frequencies humans couldn't hear. Finally, an elder with silver-traced scales spoke, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. We are Crythian. We are the hunters who culled the Vrex hordes. We are the claws that carved empires from the void. We are predators. Human, we understand strength, strategy, dominance hierarchies. She leaned closer, her crystalline eyes reflecting Celine's battered form. But this illogical, suicidal, stupid bravery? This we do not understand. This we have never understood. About your kind. Celine managed a weak laugh that sent fresh spikes of pain through her torso. Yeah, well, we're funny that way. Funny. Kreveth tested the word like a foreign substance. You sustained 14 separate penetrative wounds. You lost 1.3 liters of blood. Your probability of survival upon impact was calculated at 18%. His claws clicked against the deck plating. And you laugh. Would crying change anything? Silence again. Then, something Selene had never witnessed in 3 years of human Crithian cooperation, the entire council performed the gesture of deep respect, lowering their heads and extending their claws palm up in a show of complete vulnerability. We brought you into our fleet as diplomats, the silver-scaled elder said quietly, as translators and cultural liaisons, useful, but ultimately expendable in the great calculus of species survival. She paused. We did not bring you as heroes. We did not expect you to teach us what true strength looks like when it wears soft skin and fragile bones. The medical officer stepped forward, her scales shimmering. Tovik has not left the medical bay's outer chamber since you arrived. He refuses to eat until he knows you will recover. The other cubs have been similar. They speak of you as their shield mother. Though this is not a term that exists in our language or culture, Celine felt something warm in her chest that had nothing to do with regenerating tissue. Can I see him? They brought Tovik in barely 3 feet tall, his scales still soft with youth, his crystalline eyes enormous in his small face. He approached the medical pod with the hesitant gait of a child afraid the world might break again. Miss Celine? His voice was barely a whisper through the translator. You stayed awake? When the sharp things came? Yeah, buddy. I stayed awake. Why? It was the question of the session, apparently. The grown-ups say you should have run. That running would have been smart. Selene reached out with her good arm, and Tovik carefully placed his clawed hand in her palm. Sometimes, she said, looking not at the cub but at the council surrounding them. Being smart isn't the same as being right. Sometimes you just protect the people who need protecting. Even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. Tovik's eyes somehow grew even larger. Then, in a gesture that froze every adult Crithian in the room, the cub carefully climbed onto the medical pod and curled against Celine's uninjured side, his small body trembling with residual fear and relief. War Chief Kreveth's mandibles clicked rapidly. This is unprecedented. Cubs do not show vulnerability to outsiders. They do now, Celine interrupted gently, her hand instinctively moving to stroke Tovik's scaled head. The cub made a sound, somewhere between a purr and a trill. The elder spoke again, her voice carrying new resonance. The council has deliberated, Celine Varick. We have a proposal. I'm listening. We are predators. We understand the hunt, the kill, the survival of the strong. She gestured to Tovik, still curled against the human side. But the cubs must learn more than hunting. They must learn that true apex predators protect the pack at any cost. They must learn courage that defies logic. She paused. They must learn what you demonstrated without thought, that sometimes the greatest strength is the willingness to bleed. Kreveth stepped forward. We formally request that you remain with the fleet, not as a diplomat. His eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect. As a teacher. As an example. As a bridge between predator and protector. Celine looked down at Tovik, felt his small heartbeat against her damaged ribs, and thought about all the human instincts that made sense to her but confounded the galaxy's apex predators. The illogical courage, the stupid heroism, the willingness to die for someone else's children. I'll teach them, she said finally. But on one condition. Name it. You let humans be humans. No apologies for our soft skin or our reckless hearts. No trying to make us harder, colder, more logical. She met Kravoth's gaze steadily. Because this? She gestured to her bandaged form, to Tovik sleeping trustingly against her side. This is what we are. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what the cubs need to see. The council exchanged glances again. Then, as one, they performed the gesture of respect once more. Agreed, the elder said. Teach our cubs to be predators, but also teach them to be shields. She smiled, a gesture that revealed rows of razor teeth, but somehow conveyed warmth. Teach them to be human, in the ways that matter most. Celine smiled back, wincing as the motion pulled her stitches. Deal. And in the medical bay of a Crithian warship, surrounded by apex predators who had finally understood that sometimes the softest hearts were backed by the strongest spines, Celine Varick, shield mother, teacher, and professional taker of shrapnel, closed her eyes and slept with a cub curled trustingly against her side. Because that's what humans did. They protected the cubs. They always protected the cubs,